Good evening. Welcome to the Hingham Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday evening, February 20th, 2018. First order of business is the approval of minutes from our February 13th regular session.
Move to approve the minutes of February 13, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Public comment on items not on the agenda. Okay, next up is capital outlay recommendations.
I don't see her.
Okay, I'm looking at the back at the chair of the advisory committee, who I know is not here for that.
I don't know what you do.
Okay, we have a public hearing that's posted at 7:15, but we can't hear that until 7:15 because it's posted. So if some of you are here for that, we'll ask for your indulgence if you can. The board will take up the other business it needs, but again, since that was posted for 7:15, we do have to,
We don't want to get in trouble.
we want to do that, and we will make sure that does begin at 7:15. So the next item of business is Article D, which is the report of the Personnel Board. Tom, do you want to walk us through this, please?
Sure. So the Personnel Board issues a report to town meeting every year, which covers the costs for non-union personnel, as well as any CBAs or collective bargaining agreements that have not yet been settled. Those are generally assumed to settle for the purposes of this warrant at a 2% increase. And there is one additional cost in this article, or in this year's Article 4, which will be the cost of a new classification study. The classification study that we use to base all of our town positions, job descriptions, and salaries and salary scales was last done in 2001. So it is it's time and prudent to keep those up to date. So it's time to update that. So there's an additional $50,000 in this year's Article 4 to cover that cost, in addition to the other items I just mentioned.
Paul or Karen, any questions?
So the 378,541, 378,541 is for DPW and fire?
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
And we're carrying that at 2% in Article 4?
that's right.
Is that where it appears? Okay.
I'm sorry, and also just as well as the non-union personnel, the standard non-union personnel, but those
right.
those are the unions that are in there.
That's, okay, that number. And I would just note for the record that in addition to the monetary warrant article, there's also a report of the Personnel Board. We rely on the Personnel Board for their expertise and commitment to working with our collective bargaining units along with Mr. Mayo. So it's a lot of hard work and a lot of volunteer hours.
Absolutely. Any questions or comments from the public on Article D? If not, would one of you like to make a motion, please?
I'm sure I have a vote list here.
I have
Move
a
favorable action on Article D.
second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next on the agenda is Article V, which is the funding for the town wharfs. Those of you that were watching the meeting last week, Bill Reardon, the chair of the Harbor Development Committee, came before the town asking for funding to continue the work on the repair and restoration of 4 town-owned wharfs. The Seaport Bond Council offers grant funding for projects of this nature. They require a 20% match by a community.
So, did you mind if I hate
Please.
to interrupt you?
Go ahead.
So I see the capital just got here, and I know Bill is coming for this,
Oh.
for this conversation.
Okay,
I don't anticipate he's gonna have a whole lot more to say on it, but
No problem.
he is, I know, coming, and he said he'd
thank
be
you
here
for
at
jumping in.
7:15.
Yep. Thank you. Everybody's keeping me on target. Okay, terrific. Then I think what we'll do, since the Capital Outlay Committee has arrived, is we will take up the presentation of the FY19 capital plan. Libby and Group, we do have a public hearing that is posted at 7:15, and we have a number of interested people here in the audience. So we appreciate that we've gotten the information in advance, but this will be helpful. Libby, welcome, and maybe as well as a way to start, I know that there are members of the Capital Outlay Committee who are here with you tonight. I know there probably are a few members who are not here tonight, but as we've been having these hearings, we've just asked that that you recognize who's here in the room, as well as the other members of the committee.
Yes. So I'm Libby Claypool. I'm a member of the advisory committee and a liaison to Capital, and former chair. So I'm here covering for Brendan Kiernan, who's our chair. He's out of town on a business trip today. And we have Eric Valentine and Tim Finnerty from Capital, and Eric Haskell is not available.
And your very important town support, Jean Montgomery, I see.
Yes,
Snuck
and
into the
Jean.
back as well. Yep.
Our fearless leader.
Libby, thank you. As I mentioned, by providing this in advance, it was very helpful for us. I know I have one or two questions about a few projects. I don't know if my colleagues do as well. Perhaps if you could, you know, what might be helpful in particular for the audience is to just give sort of an overview of what the capital outlay recommendation is and the funding sources. I find that kind of that last page that you have in the report is particularly helpful, and that might also give the viewing audience a little bit of context.
Okay, well, I am just going to mention a couple of kind of summary things as far as how we make our judgments, and I will make this quick, but just for the people at home to understand that. So capital expenditures are supposed to be, according to the town's financial policy, between 2% and 5% of the operating budget. And we all have in our warrants, and I just kind of highlighted this so people can see, had some periods of out of range, but we're getting back in there. And we expect this budget this year to be within the policy range of 2 to 5%, probably on the low end, as we have been for the last few years. So, but that is where we are at so far with the current budget. Capital assets are typically assets that have an economic useful life of more than 5 years and cost more than $10,000, or are otherwise classified as fixed assets on the town's financial statements. So there are some instances where there are items below that. You guys probably know, but for people that are new to capital, we go through every request for every department and just evaluate it based on criteria that we've used for quite a while, and just to kind of highlight it's if the lack of the item is going to put citizens or employees at risk, if the item is broken, if it is core to the department's mission, if the item is still functional but repairs are required that will cost 25% more than the purchase price of a new item, and if the capital item is substantially over its originally projected life and its failures will jeopardize the department's mission. And then also, if the capital item can be recovered in 3 years or less, if it has a short payback. So that's a criteria we use. We go through, again, every department, step back, look at the budget as a whole, and then consider if there's anything we're looking to defer, how that's going to impact that department going forward, because we don't want to create a bottleneck out into the future years. So I guess to get to the numbers that we are recommending here, I think we usually try to tell you where we were to begin with. So just real quick, we started with a budget of $5,714,000, I'll just approximate. And of that, $3,577,000 is from the tax levy. And looking at the budget, I think people are familiar that some of the other sources are the mooring permits, and anything that's typically harbor master items that come out of the mooring permits. Available reserves, if that's going to be used for a specific project. User rates and charges, the country club, sewer department, and the recreation department. And if there's any borrowings. So really our target and what we focus on is what's coming from the levy. So again, that's where we started at $5,714,000, and then when we started our deliberation, we had $3,577,000 from the levy. We deferred about $1.1 million from the levy, and then an item for $150,000 from the user rates and charges. So our total, if we're just going to focus on the levy portion of that $3,577,000, we deferred $1.113 million, and we had some price changes from the departments prior to our deliberations, and that results in our recommendation of the 391, 027 from the levy. So just to continue that, if you're looking at the last page of the 5-year, it's just going on the funding sources. That $2,391,027 is what we're recommending to be funded from the tax levy, $27,000 from fund balance, mooring permits, $1 million, well, actually $1.5 million from available reserves. I'll find out from either you or Lucy later if I think that $1.5 million is the, for the fire apparatus. $1 million of which came from Avalon, and that is gonna be coming from fund balance, because when they are paying us, it's going into fund balance. But I don't know if you want us to reflect the $500,000 as borrowing, because I think the warrant article as it stands right now does reflect that that's coming from borrowing.
It does, and if you can just stay in touch with how the advisory committee votes on that, that would be terrific. And
We've already voted that article, and it is noted that it's going to be coming from borrowing.
Yep.
So I think what we'll do on ours is then we'll show $1 million from available reserves, $460,000 is user rates and charges, which again is the 3 departments that I mentioned, and then we'll show then $500,000 from borrowing. So we'll just pull that $500,000 down.
Sure.
And then that is a total of $4,378,027. So that kind of shows you where we started and where we ended. And then if we're just gonna go by department, I can just give you the totals. And I don't, there are not a lot of unusual items. There are a few. So if when we touch upon any department, you have a question, but I think they're pretty standard. So do you want me to give you the department totals? Or,
Sure, you know what I might
I
suggest,
don't-
because I think we might have some questions about kind of individual departments, so
Sure.
maybe that, and then if there's anything that kind of we've missed that jumps out to you, that would, maybe we
Sure.
could highlight those if we could. So,
because this will get posted, I would think, with your minutes, so do we really, do you want me to read through each department's total? I can do that. I mean, we've traditionally done that, but if,
yeah,
for the
I think
sake
I
of
might- I
time,
think I might defer to my colleagues for just
Sure.
questions, so that we can, if we need a little
Sure.
discussion on a few items.
Okay.
I had a couple, Paul or Karen, I don't know if you want me to lead off, or
Yeah,
if you,
go ahead,
okay.
and then I.
Follow up.
So I just, a couple of things, just a little bit of confirmation at first.
Yes.
That in the police department and in a number of places, we have a number of assets that we just, we replace on a schedule. So I think last year we didn't have any cruisers, so this year it's 7 cruisers. So we're doing that
Yes.
on about it's about 5 years of purchase, 1 year off, or,
yeah, I think it's been extended a little bit, and just, yeah, and last year, as you recall, was not supposed to be a no-buy year.
Right.
And was a nice budget saver when they were able to, because they're getting more life out of the current cruisers.
Yep, yep. And I've also noticed, and I think it makes a lot of sense, that even as you look into, for example, the library and the schools, you've got certain things that are on, a replacement cycle. The recreation department, that's coming out of user fees, is that
Yes.
correct?
And of the total from the levy that I mentioned, I just wanted to, some of those things you're mentioning, like IT equipment for the library, different recurring items, IT equipment for the town. That is, you're not gonna see the total here, but when we go through, we look at what are the annual things that are just every year we're gonna have.
Sure.
And that's about 664,000, and just for informational purposes, that's about 27.8%, so almost 28% of the total recommendations from the levy are just, the amounts might fluctuate, but they're recurring things every year, and that does not include the cruisers.
Yep. And I would just remind my colleague that as Libby's making that point, what it really does say is that, you know, we have these are ongoing capital needs of the town. So in a year when we try to sort of balance the budget, and we say, oh, we're going to defer some of these capital items, they're not going to go away. It's
No.
just going to mean that the next year, 27% is going to be a larger number.
So, Marion, if you add the cruisers to that,
Yeah.
which really is, you know, occasionally, like you said, every 6 years, so we might get
Yep.
a no buy, but then that pushes that number up over 800,000.
Yeah. I had just two questions and then
Yes.
a comment. So I noticed that in the school system-wide, that the 10-year master plan update is in for FY '20. Was that a school department request, or is that a decision by the capital outlay committee to defer that? I had understood that work was hopefully going to be completed in FY '19.
That was a capital outlay committee decision because we funded last year already, I think it was $45,000 for the master plan. And I don't have my warrant here, I don't know if anyone can see that, but we funded the 10-year master plan last year. And I think that the school department explained that some of that money for the 10-year master plan, obviously Foster is a big
Question.
part of that discussion because they're with the MSBA application that they made, there's a lot of discussion about replacing that school. So they spent some time towards doing that, which was really kind of part of the master plan, but we had already funded that and we have limited money to allocate. So we felt like what we had funded was sufficient for what they had requested, and if they had shifted that money around, we had to kind of.
I might just ask, and I know again that these recommendations have just come out and there's
Yes.
some hearings that have to be made. It would, I think I would just want to make sure that the master plan work, which this board has been very supportive of the school committee doing, isn't interrupted by deferring these funds a year. It doesn't sound like it will be, but it would, I think it would be reassuring to this board that the school committee has the opportunity to just review and react. My other question was just on technology. It looks like close to $500,000 for technology, school system-wide, with $230,000 for infrastructure and Chromebook replacements. Are those Chromebooks and things, are those 100% taxpayer funded, or is any portion of that being funded by the students?
I believe that if you were to ask the school department, I think that there are a portion of those Chromebooks that are funded, but I believe, I don't have the detailed schedule for the 229, but I believe the bulk of that, actually, I think only about, I'm going off the top of my head,
Sure.
maybe $89,000 is Chromebooks, and the rest
Okay.
are power supplies and major infrastructure. So
Oh.
just so you know, the bulk of that number is for major infrastructure and power supplies and not Chromebooks.
Thank you. You know what, that's helpful. And then, before I turn over to my colleagues, I would just mention that I know that for the Capital Outlay Committee, the mooring permits has been a source of revenue for harbor master-related capital items. We're going to be talking about Article V later tonight. As we continue to look at using our mooring permit fees, we have a dredging that has to come up in the harbor and some other commitments. So I would just ask, you guys are great at keeping records and making all kinds of notes, and you really document your work very well, and I think that's really to the credit of the committee. Next year, before you make any recommendations about potential use of mooring permit fees, I'd ask you to check with the town administrator, because as we're looking at funding for dredging, we just want to make sure that we don't have different groups looking for that as a funding source. So if you could please reach out to, to our office next year.
And I would tell you, just from capital, really the only thing that comes through there a lot of times are boat engines, and, I mean,
Sure.
that's the main thing that comes from Ken Corson, the harbor master, from the mooring permits, and he's great at going out and getting grants, so there actually isn't a lot that comes from capital from mooring, so.
Right, we're just, as we're
But I-
looking at,
I
as
know,
we're
the
looking at the
dredging's a
balances,
big number.
they're a little
I know.
tight, so.
Yep.
Big fat zero right now.
Paul or
Yes.
Karen, any additional questions or comments for capital outlay?
I just have one. What's the story with the glass block window situation at the high school in the gym?
That is a warrant article. So that is
Next week.
outside of capital, because
week.
that is something that, the school department submitted a warrant article for that, and you know, we did have a couple of, if you notice, I think there were maybe 2 air handlers that they had requested for the high school. We felt like, based on the way the warrant article is worded, that it's possible that some of that additional work might be potentially picked up if that article gets approved. So that is, luckily not Capitol's decision. That's going to be at town meeting and the voters to decide if they want to vote that.
And I was
Article.
just,
Thing is listed here.
when I met with Tom earlier tonight, I asked to make sure that we had some information in advance of our hearing that article next week.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else,
No, I think I'm right.
Karen?
Yeah, just a couple questions, Libby.
Yes.
Is there a way to sort of quantify percentage-wise what represents acquisition of new items versus repair and replacement of existing items?
That's not a figure that we have available for you right now, but if that's something that you needed, we can prepare that for you. But I think most of this is replacement of existing equipment. I would venture to guess that when we do that calculation, what's new is versus replacement is a small portion of.
Okay. And in analyzing sort of the allocation metrics that you referenced earlier, do you take account of R&M expenses in each of the department budgets? Do you rely on anecdotal evidence from the departments, you know, in terms of useful life and repair and those sort of?
I think where that comes into capital sometimes is more when we see things coming through capital that we think maybe should be on the operating side. And it might be a repair. We had a couple of items like that, actually. I think $8,000 each at a couple of the schools this year with some inspecting some water pumps. And so we felt that that was something that really didn't meet our criteria for this year, because we know that, you know, it didn't become a priority one when we went through and determined, and we felt that that funding should not come from our budget.
Okay.
So I think for the most part, it's when we see something here that shouldn't be here versus the other way around.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. Is there anybody in the audience who had a question or comment about the capital outlay, the capital plan? Okay. Libby, this is going to be posted on the website, on the town website?
Yes, it should
That
be,
would,
I would think.
that would be great. And I know that you have to, there are going to be a couple reviews, so we are going to be voting all of our budgets on the 27th. We appreciate the Capital Outlay Committee concluding its work and coming in tonight, because we have a lot of decisions to make next week, and it's great to have this information so soon. And again, you know, this document here represents a whole lot of work by a lot of people, a lot of hearings. You've got a really rigorous process, and we really do appreciate the very, very thoughtful and the great work in terms of, you know, helping be good stewards of our capital assets in this town. So thank you to the entire committee, and thank you to Jean for all the great work. And as I said, we'll be voting next week, so.
That's great, and my last pitch is gonna be that, you know, Tom knows, and when Ted was here too, there was a commitment to increase capital by $100,000 a year, so the target we had always kind of looked at for this year was 2.4, and I know that last year that got a $50,000 haircut. It's exactly the word I was thinking for the snow removal budget, and we understand there was some a lot of expenses in that area, but we don't want to get back to where we're the place that things get cut from. So I think we were given a target of 2.3 to 2.4, and we're right in that. So I guess what I would just ask is, we hope that this is the budget that ends up going through, but I don't know, do we, I guess you can let us know offline if that's something that we need to kind of target if for whatever reason that this number is not going to
So we'll be,
work.
you know, public meeting next week, next
Yeah.
Tuesday, anybody's welcome. We're gonna discuss and vote
Yeah.
our budgets live, so.
So I just
you
say
know,
for
we-
everybody, that was
yeah.
our target, and we
No,
hope that we
absolutely.
get
And
to
again,
stay at that
you know,
number.
part of the reason that it's helpful to have this is, as you know from being on the advisory committee, we're sitting with a $2.5 million deficit right
Yep.
now. So we, in the next week, have a lot of hard decisions to make.
Mm-hmm.
And it was important to us that we had the opportunity to hear and review the capital plan so that it received the same consideration as all the other budgets, so.
And we cut to get to this point, so we would hate to cut further, but I guess stay tuned.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the request of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 7,654 feet of 4- and 6-inch gas main on Main Street. Barbara's here too, right? Hi, Barbara, come on up. Please come on up to the table. You know, I suspect I see some people in the neighborhood, I see some people in the audience who I recognize as being residents of Main Street. So welcome, and we're glad you're here. Here's just how we're going to kind of have this hearing. We're going to let, these folks are going to make just kind of a short presentation. We're going to have questions and comments from the board, and then we're going to open it up to the public. So any questions or comments that you have, if you wouldn't mind to wait to be recognized, we have a podium over there. And I would ask you in particular, because this is a project that is bringing many of you out, as you introduce yourself, please also give your address, because we want to document all that for our records and make sure that all of the questions and concerns that people have are properly addressed. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm Barbara Kelleher, permits representative from National Grid. So do you want me to read the petitions?
Sure.
Start with you. Okay, number one is Common Street. The National Grid hereby respectfully request your consent to install and maintain approximately 400 feet, more or less, of 4-inch gas main in Common Street, Hingham, from the new 6-inch gas main in Main Street, easterly, to the existing 2-inch gas main at house number 11, Common Street, all of which to abandon the existing 2-inch and 1.5-inch steel in Common Street. That's a small one.
Yep.
And that's
yep.
102 years old, you say, right?
Did you?
Yeah.
Is that,
That's what it says on my vote list.
all right?
So I guess we got the useful life out of that one.
Then, this is the, going up in scope of the project. The National Grid hereby respectfully request your consent to install and maintain approximately 800 feet, more or less, of 4-inch gas main in Main Street, Hingham, from the existing 4-inch gas main at house number 597 southerly to the existing 3-inch gas main at house number 627, and approximately 6 feet, more or less, of 2-inch gas main in Friend Street, from the new 4-inch gas main in Main Street to tie Friend Street over to the new gas main. All of which to abandon the 3-inch steel in Main Street.
And so, and Barbara, actually, we have, I think, on our vote list, it's kind of 5 different pieces, but that all are really part of this whole Main Street thing.
Yes,
So
yeah,
maybe
so
before we go on to the other,
Okay.
besides Aberdeen and Marymount and Marshall, let's maybe, if we can, talk about what's going to happen on Main Street. And perhaps as well, if we could, you know, if between the 3 of you, you could talk a little bit about what we will experience as a town, what this will mean in particular for people who live along Main Street, what sort of hours of operation can be expected, what sort of notification. Let's kind of give people the big picture if we could.
So, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So, Roger Fernandez, town engineer. So what we're talking about is a fairly substantial gas replacement project on Main Street. As Barbara stated, it's in and around 298 Main Street up through to 598 Main Street, I'm sorry, 627 Main Street, to give you some perspective with, as to where those addresses fall. We're looking at approximately where Central Fire Station is, up slightly past the intersection of High Free and Main, about another 800 feet up from that section of roadway. So, so it's a pretty lengthy piece of main replacement, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,600 feet. So what we've done, as we have in the past, is we meet with National Grid's team, and we try to develop a plan that will be as least disruptive to the not only the adjacent homeowners, but also the commuters. So in an effort to do that, we've all agreed night work would be the most prudent way to attack the work. So right now, the goal is to start work in and around 7 p.m. and continue work through to 5 a.m. On the main, on Main Street. And there are some of the secondary roads, Aberdeen, Common, Marymount. Some of that work might fall during the day just because of the side roads, and if there's some efficiencies in terms of getting the work done as quickly as possible, we want to be able to provide National Grid with some of that latitude if we think it's in the best interest of the town. The main work, though, again, on Main Street, we're going to use the word main a lot today, is going to be done at night, and the balance of the work might be done at night or during the day.
So a couple might be a good place to pause for a few questions. So if I live at 298 Main Street, how noisy will this night work be? And this is a stretch of 7,600 feet, so how many nights as a resident at 298 Main Street, about how many nights might I have a crew working close enough to my residence where it might disturb us at night?
I think right now, we feel that 150 feet a night is not unattainable. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of installation. And when we say work on Main Street, that doesn't mean that someone's going to be in front of your home for that entire period of time, but they require a certain staging area on Main Street in something that looks like 300 or 400 lineal feet of roadway to place their machinery. So at any given point, there might be 3 nights, if all goes well, where you might find a crew in front of your home. Might be less than that, and that's weather dependent, of course, where they would then continue to progress in a direction away from that particular residence.
And maybe this is also a good point to talk, because we've had a few meetings about the notification process. So how, and we've talked about National Grid really taking the lead on some of this, but how will residents along this stretch know when, those couple of nights where the work could be close to their home? How are we going to notify people?
So we have our avenues, right? We have our social media, the Facebook and the Twitter that we have available to us that we want to share with Dennis and his team. Dennis also sends out a notification document that has their telephone number and ways to access National Grid. They also place door hangers on the doors as they get closer to those, and they try to do a really good job of notifying people in advance. At no point will you experience, for any extended period of time, disruption in terms of access to your home. If you have a driveway and you need to get there might be a short period of time where they're digging in front of the driveway, but you're not looking at not being able to get to your house for 3 nights. That work gets plated, gets covered, you can access your home and your address. This will not. If there is any disruption, it'll be for a relatively short period of time.
And, you mentioned that trying to think about when to do this work. The factors that led to the decision to recommend night work versus day work, I mean, how many cars go down Main Street in a day? It's
22,000.
22,000.
Okay.
Yeah, 22,000 vehicles. Main Street functions fairly well, but as a 1-lane in each direction, 2-lane roadway, we've all experienced that for bus stops. If
Yep.
there's schools about to get in session, you experience backup. As part of this project, as part of this work, being able to do it at night would prevent the need, as we get into the later hours, of long detours. You just schedule a police detail, and they can allow traffic to offset, 1 lane, using that 1 lane. When they start at 7 p.m., there's still some traffic on the road, but so there might be some initial detours at that point. The detours are going to be dependent on where they are on Main Street, but by working at night, we think that it's going to make it a lot easier for the commuter. It would be very, very difficult to do.
And in those 3 nights where there might be a crew outside your house, I mean, how much of that time will be extremely noisy work that could be an inconvenience to residents? I mean, is it a lot of, you got to open up the road?
Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be noisy, and I say that because I want to make sure we set the expectations. This is construction equipment. There'll be saw cutting. There'll be people talking, there's work that has to take place on a conventional project. We don't want to mislead people to think, that this is not going to be a disruption at some point. But unfortunately, there is no other way to do that. So we ask for, folks to be patient and allow National Grid to do their work. But yeah, for a short period of time, it's a noisy, disruptive project, sure.
One final question before turning it over to my colleagues. A lot of times when we open up a road like this, especially Main Street, where this is a big deal, and we're going to go all the way down Main Street over the next couple of years.
Yeah, so this is phase one, if you will, of a larger project. The limits of the project are likely to take most of Main Street from Hull all the way up to Unions Corner, yeah.
To what extent is the water company participating? Because this seems to me to be a really opportune time to replace water mains.
Yeah.
I don't know what the age of those mains are, but
Well, we as again, part of our normal course, we did contact Aquarian, let them know that there's a project that's going to be underway, and as soon as they being National Grid begins to finish their work, it'll be incumbent upon us to pave the road so that the residents see a final product that's smooth, dense, and aesthetically pleasing. When we pave a road, we expect that it's not going to be cut again. We've taken a pretty hard stance over the last decade. So we provide them an opportunity to, at the very least, extend their mains or their services as they might need to get it outside of the proposed new pavement surface, I should say. If they don't do that, then we're going to ask them to put the road back to its pre-condition. So we're giving them that opportunity. We haven't heard that's something they're really willing to do at this point, but we're really encouraging to do that. So.
thank you. Okay. Paul?
Thank you for asking that question about the pipes. To me, this is an ideal time for the water company to step up to the plate and replace some of the aging infrastructure. I have a question on the plates. Are the plates going to be left in the roadway for any prolonged period of time? Are they going to be asphalt over the lips? How's that going to go?
If the plates do stay, they'll put asphalt around the outside of the plate. Another way to do the plates is you can actually mill in and install the plates, even. But because the work is just, it's moving at such a fast pace, it's really a wasted effort. So if they are requiring plates, or if they do need to put plates down based on the where they left off with the work, and we're going to try to minimize that, then it will, at the very best, it will be asphalt placed around.
What's the depth of the cut?
I think they're looking at 3 feet deep on the valve.
3.5 feet deep on the main depth, current main depth as is.
So 3.5 feet. Yeah.
I take it the detail presence is going to be robust, considering you're working at night.
Yeah, so as we begin to move forward, and we've already spoken to the chief who's there now, we've talked about this. So we're going to make sure that we have enough details there to assist, yeah.
So I've had an opportunity to spend a great deal of time talking about this with Roger. He nicely called. We had a long conversation initially, and then a follow-up conversation at the end of last week, where many of the questions that you, Mary and Paul, raised, I also raised with Roger. I think this is going to be a significantly disruptive project for anybody who travels on Main Street, and particularly for those folks who live along Main Street. That said, when you're dealing with this kind of aging infrastructure, we also don't want ruptured gas mains, so we need to undertake this work. There were a couple of things that you and I talked about. We made some minor, but I think important modifications to the letter of condition with respect to the grant of location, including I think it's important that if folks have concerns or complaints or questions, they have somebody that they can pick up the phone and call. Because it's not just sort of this one hit for, some 3 or 4 day period. It's going to be an ongoing project. I think that, if they call us, which I'm assuming they'll do as well, if they call us, we can't really answer their questions. So I think it would be really helpful for this sort of a project to have some sort of dedicated email or phone line where people know that if they have a question or concern, they can actually get somebody to address them. You know, I wanted to make sure that, in addition to police, that fire and the schools were involved. Since it's night work, at one point I'm like, what about the bus stops? And Roger's like, Karen, it starts at 7. So the one place that might come into play, though, is if there ends up being day work on some of those ancillary roadways. A couple of the roads that you mentioned here have pretty significant bus stops, and I said to Roger, I know that because I'm usually late for a meeting here coming to Town Hall, and I'm always stopped by the bus at Marymount Road. I love the little kids there, but I'm always late. And then, and I'm sure some of the residents in the room will speak to this too, you know, the expectation on restoration of the streetscape is that what it looked like before, it should look like after. And again, given the, I think the significance of this project, I just wanted to be sure that when we talked about shoulders and driveways and all that stuff, the bottom line for me is that the visual that we have now is the visual we have going forward. I note, and I'm surprised you didn't bring this up, I note that we pay particular attention to the shade trees along Main Street, which are a pretty significant environmental asset for the town. And you've always been, you know, that's been an ongoing part of your letter of conditions, and so I've appreciated the care you've taken with that in the past. And again, this is just another really significant part of that Main Street streetscape. So, you know, the saw cutting, the sawing of the trenches, you know, ideally it'd be great to be able to stage that earlier in the evening, you know, but you got to manage your project. I think that may be it for me. So, you know, I guess to sum up, I think it is going to be disruptive, but I think we could go a long way in continuing to manage expectations if we provide an outlet and response and to residents who do call. And I think that it would be helpful for us if you had some communication back to the town engineer's office so that we have some sense of, gee, you know, how's this going? My sense is we're going to hear about it anyway, but, you know, I just think to keep us in the loop on the public perception and public concern around the project. You know, to me, it's just a little bit different than the usual project. And Barbara, I have to say, in the number of letters that we've had presented, it's really nice to meet you tonight.
Oh, thank you.
And, you know, you mentioned like sending notes out to people about when, you know, the crew will be right in front of their house. I would ask that people have a week's notice. I just, you know, I think it's going to be an inconvenience, but I think sometimes what creates a lot of bad will is when something unexpected happens. And
Yep, I agree.
so,
I did have one other question. I think I asked you this, was as we progress down Main Street, is it likely that any of the other ancillary roadways are going to want to try to tie in to the gas as we go, or is this strictly a replacement of this main?
It's strictly replacement.
Okay, so it's just existing gas, there's no new gas going in? Okay,
Yeah.
Replacing aging infrastructure.
okay.
So the response was no new main, it's just replacing the existing, just wanted folks to hear that.
and I do remember because we got a notification, the number of gas leaks along Main Street is fairly significant. This is a good thing to do.
Okay.
Can I,
Are-
before you turn it over, I
please.
just wanted to just really quickly, as folks get up and ready, we're going to have a public forum discussion on February 28th. At that meeting, we'll have some of National Grid's team members to be there to help answer questions along with folks from our office. So this is not your last opportunity to, you know, delve deeper into sort of this project and what, you know, what it's going to entail and how it might impact you. Also, just to sort of help maybe in a good way, I mean, I think it's great to be able to contact your representatives, and you can call Karen, Mary, Paul, but I'll tell you the way it works. They'll call either me or Tom. They'll end up calling us. And so if you want to get a quick solution, and we want to make sure we can try to help in any way, the most efficient way to do it would be to use the number on the National Grid notification. If at that point it's something that you feel like hasn't been addressed, then our office is there to help. So we would ask you to kindly give the board a break if you can, and give us a chance to try to figure it out first. And then if you're not happy, they'll always be here, okay?
Did you have one more question?
Yeah, just question and comment. Roger, what's your estimate on the time it's going to take to do this? Is it a month, 2 months?
Right now, we're looking at an entire summer project. So I know National Grid's going to commit all their resources, and by that we mean if they can bring out 2 crews to expedite the work, they've said that they're willing to do that. And really, you know, everything that we're giving you is intended to be sort of, we hope, a worst-case scenario. And we don't want to set the expectations too high. So we're thinking that it's, you know, it's a few months worth of work, several months worth of work. Not in front of your house, on along 1.5 miles, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm on the street where that work was done previously, and frankly, I didn't find it to be problematic. And to be honest, I was delighted to see the gas line replaced, because, you know, every now and then you could get that whiff of gas smell, and it's very unsettling. So thank you for putting your resources to doing this.
Just a couple things.
1 second, Tom, did you?
So I just wanted to clarify, so Mary, you had suggested earlier that you'd like to see a week's notice to the residents. In the conditions in here is 2 weeks' notice for the commencement of work, but then 48 hours for each home. I just want to make sure that the expectations are understood and that there's no confusion. So if you want to speak to that, you might need to use the microphone.
That's
Sure, could I invite you up to the mic and?
Dennis McCaffrey with National Grid, and Val is here with me. This is a difficult project, which has been kind of talked about for quite some time, but it's a necessary project that we feel like we have to do. So a couple of things, we're really gonna be conscious of. I know there's a big 4th of July road race, so we're really gonna look for a calendar of events and work with the town and really be proactive. I know the police is here. Police are here. We talked about a traffic management plan, and we'll meet with the police, fire prior to the project. We didn't want to put the cart before the horse here, before the grant hearing. But it's, you know, some of this pipe dates back to 1913. There is a leak history, as you know, on Main Street. And we'll do everything we can to work with the town. I do agree, it's gonna be disruptive. I'm glad the work zone was pointed out. It's 300 feet approximately. And I don't know, Val, if you have anything to add about the work itself. It is noisy. We're gonna try to get the majority of the, you know, the noisier portion of the work done at the first part of the evening. On the butter letters, they go out 2 weeks prior to the project starting. There's a dedicated number on there for any construction issues. My number's on the email you get, or my name's on the email you get for town notifications. And, you know, like I said, we've done a lot of these projects. We're on a 20-year plan to replace what we call leak-prone pipe, at-risk pipe. So this is, you know, we've been talking about it. It's time to, given the leak history, we had a couple grade 1 leaks on Main Street. We don't want to do this piecemeal. We want to try to get it done at once. And again, the goal at National Grid is to deliver safe, reliable natural gas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to add something, Val? Sure, come on up to the mic, please.
Hi, my name is Val Monplaisir. I'm the supervisor that'll be in charge of the project for National Grid. And just to give you a little bit of an overview of how the process will work, we'll first start off with confirming the gas services as they are to residents right now, because unfortunately some of the records from 1913 aren't exact. So the soil conditions might have changed, the depths might have changed, roadways might have been redone, and records might have been changed. And unfortunately, we don't have those conditions. So we will start off in one area and we'll be moving right down. So you might see a crew in front of your house for one night. And then they'll be moving right down. They'll be confirming every service in the project, and then we'll start seeing the extended periods of stay, where it'd be maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 nights in front of your home, depending on what location they are. That'll be, we are dedicating minimum of 1 crew, hoping to get an additional crew onto the project to expedite the process. It would be, as Roger said, we're looking at hopefully 150 feet a night. I'm on the hopeful side. I've seen this crew I know I have dedicated to what they do much faster work than that, but again, we don't know the soil conditions, we don't know the digging conditions at all yet, so I'm not going to promise anything. I don't want to set expectations too high, but that'll be the process initially, and then after we get majority of the main in, I'll be in contact with the DPW. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves where we gas in a new main, it's energized, and then we can't deliver on getting every customer tied over to this new gas main prior to the season ending. We're going to work with the DPW and get what's expected for this year done so that they have enough time to get in, pave that portion, make sure the road's flush, level, new flush service. That way, come the winter time, there won't be any issues, and then readdress it next year and keep moving on forward from that standpoint. So that way, we're not running into, well, this road's in terrible condition, and we're leaving it that way for the winter, because that's obviously something no one wants to hear or see. So,
Thank you.
and again, next week we'll be in the community meeting, and it'll be a lot more of a layout. I'll be giving out my number there for any residents that have any concerns or issues, and then I'll be walking the job with the contractor that we've chosen, and then we'll be going forward from that point.
Terrific.
And so it sounds like there might be a couple of points of confirmation that your standards have been met as you move down the street. So it sounds like you or your team will say, okay, this 300-foot work zone's okay, I'm moving on to the next one. Does your office monitor this as well, so that so you're pointing out like, okay, that sidewalk needs to be fixed or whatever, you're making sure that,
Correct.
okay,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Is the gas line under the public way?
It is, it's all in a public way. Where in the public way, it sort of does fluctuate, but it's all in a public way, yeah.
Okay, so it meanders.
Meanders a little bit, yeah.
Anyone in the public have a question or a comment? Sure, could you come up to the mic, please?
Hi, Joe Phelan from 506 Main Street. I'm going to be right in the middle of this project for the entire time. I'm right in between Marymount and Marshall Street. I've been at 506 for about 12 years. We've had several gas main leaks right in front of my house. So I have experience with all this night work that you're talking about. 3 nights for replacing of the main seems a little aggressive because I've had leaks in front of my house where I've had plates over my driveway for over a week. The last time was this past summer. There was a leak. We need this work done, so I'm not opposed to having the work done. The work was done, but it took over a week. Plates were placed on both sides of the entrance to the driveway, killing all the grass and whatnot, endangering the shade tree, as was brought up, that was just planted. I asked the person from National Grid, what's going to happen? Don't worry, they're going to come back, they're going to replace it, it's going to be perfect just the way it was before. Never happened. They cut the pavement on my driveway. They came back, they paved it, but there's a big gash there. They said, oh, we're going to top coat it, it's going to look just like it did before. We're going to replace the grass, don't worry. I called DPW, DPW referred me to National Grid. National Grid said, don't worry, someone's going to be out there. 2 guys in the truck came out there, and on both sides of the driveway where there was all gravel and a mess, they came out, sat on the back of a truck and sprinkled some grass seed over what was there, and nothing ever grew. And it still looks like hell today. Not that my front lawn is the best on Main Street, but that still looks like hell. So when you say it's going to look exactly like it looks now, I don't want it to look like it looks now. I want it to look like it looked 2 years ago. As far as responsiveness, when I got this notice from the town, I emailed one of our selectmen, who was very responsive, but I also called you. And you responded right away. You left me a message the next day. Don't worry, so-and-so is going to get back to you right away. That was a week ago. And I think it was Mr. McCaffrey. I'm not sure. I don't know the name. No one's gotten back to me. No one's...
Mr. Phelan, could you direct your comments
Oh,
to
I'm
the
sorry.
board? No,
So
it's okay.
so no
Yep.
one's gotten back
Yep.
to me. So that's the responsiveness
Sure.
that I've received. So for a year and a half, National Grid hasn't done what it said it was going to do to restore the front of my premises from a gas leak. Now, as I said, there's been 3 or 4 gas leaks. I want the gas main fixed. I understand we all have to sacrifice to have the gas main. I don't have gas, but we need it fixed. I don't want to have to rely on National Grid. National Grid has let me down those 3 times, the last time, and this time. Not you, miss. You called me back right away, left me a message, but I never got a follow-up call, right? So I want to know if they're not responsive. I don't want this to be a part-time job for me.
Sure.
To have to restore my premises. I want it done. And I want some insurances in here. And the other thing that happened the last time there was a leak, which was about a year ago, they put a crew out there, and all of a sudden the crew disappeared. And I had metal plates with teenagers coming back and forth across metal plates for, like I said, over a week, because the crew disappeared and went to someplace else that they had to do. This gentleman just said, oh, we'll have a minimum of 1 crew. Is 1 crew going to be enough? How are we guaranteed that there's going to be enough resources to do this job in a timely fashion? Just like any other contractor, things come up for National Grid. They pull people off of this job, and then it takes longer to complete this.
So let me see if I can give you some assurances, and I hope they're not pulling anybody out of anywhere on this project when they begin this. This is not going to happen. And the reason why it's not going to happen is our office isn't going to let happen. They've committed some resources. I can't speak to your particular repair, and I'll let Dennis speak to the responsiveness, but when they pull this permit with us and they start work, they're going to finish the work.
Okay, so what are the assurances we have? Do we have something in the letter that says they have to have X amount of people, X pieces of equipment, they can't pull equipment off?
Yeah, we don't, throughout the engineering office, we have a commitment from them that they're going to supply us with a crew to do the work. The only other what else we talked about was also the potential to supply additional crew to continue to expedite the work. So I don't know at this point that.
Well, how many people are in a crew? How many pieces of equipment do we know?
We'll be talking on the 28th, and maybe Val, this is something you can bring up, or maybe you can supply him with this.
I don't want to come back on the 28th. I'm saying,
Yeah.
you say we have assurances, we know they're going to do this. They gave us assurances. What are the assurances? What are the numbers? What's the equipment? What's a crew? How many people in a crew?
Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion.
Sure.
Mr. Phelan's asking some very good questions here, and I'm going to ask that, that to the extent that we're not, that we follow up with some of this on the 28th, but I'm also going to ask that if somebody from National Grid could please reach out to Mr. Phelan. I think it's going to be important that, to his point, restoring to, there's some issues there, but let's make sure we understand some of that. I also think that what we might want to do, and again, I maybe take this offline with Tom and Roger, but perhaps 3 or 4 weeks into this project, we might ask for an update to this board so we can see how it's going. So we can see how the first couple weeks are going with things. What is our experience with everything that's going on? What is new? I can assure you that the people sitting at this table are very committed to making sure that this project is as least disruptive as it possibly can be. And
But my question is how? How are you getting those assurances? The engineer tells me, we have assurances about crews, we
Yeah.
have assurances about resources.
so,
What
yeah,
assurances?
we, what
Do we
we,
have numbers? Do we have commitments?
yeah, so.
Can we get those?
Excuse me, we typically have a grant of location that gives a number of different conditions about what is to be done, how things are to be restored. We have found that when we have done these grants of location with National Grid in the past, through a lot of the projects we've been doing with our road building all over town in the last few years, we've had a very good partnership. Inevitably, sometimes there are problems, that happens, but we've enjoyed a very good partnership with National Grid with our road building program. And, we look to applying some of that to this project, which is admittedly bigger, but we have a lot of good practices in place.
Can I ask what they are? I mean, I'm just asking for details
So-
about that, like, do we
Sure.
have any kind of
We're not,
assurances
we're not,
about
we're not, we
resources?
weren't prepared to come and tell you, you know, we're gonna have a 350 excavator and a 22-ton truck for laborers. So what we do is the National Grid provides the labor necessary, the machinery necessary to target at least 150 feet per night. We have also past experience, as the chair had mentioned. We have done other projects with them, so they've shown us historically that they've been able to satisfy the conditions of the grant and the production that we've looked for in the past. So we have good experience. So based on that experience and the targets right now in terms of lineal footage, that's what gives us some assurances. But we don't typically ask them to list the equipment and the number of people. Now, certainly I understand your position with respect to your lawn. I would be upset too as well, and I'd like to take the opportunity maybe to speak to you and Dennis and see if we can't resolve this right away.
Right, again, I'm not looking for just to fix 100 feet in front of my...
Well, I do. I want to fix the 100
Well,
feet in front of your
that's
house.
fine, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about not creating the same problem I had for every resident
Right.
between
Understood.
292
Understood.
and 796. And what do they do if they find themselves in my position where, as you can tell, I can be a pain in the neck when I want to be, and I try to be a pain in the neck, and still National Grid didn't fix it. So then what do you do?
No, I
You
understand.
come to the selectmen meeting.
Which is what I did, which is what I hate to do, as you know.
And I would also maybe ask that at the conclusion of this piece, as we move on, I would also, we do have a grant of location that gives some specifics, and this may address some of the questions that you've raised. So I would like to give you the opportunity to look at that and perhaps talk to Roger and Dennis as we continue on with our business. That way, perhaps it won't require you to come back next week, but if you could spend a few minutes.
Yeah, they were in front of my house. I mean, what you heard described was what happened in front of my house. I mean, and, it kind of
They've been in front of my house 3 or 4 times.
Well, I see the plates, Joe. I've seen them.
Right.
Yeah, I get your point.
I mean, my section of Main Street has been under construction since I moved in there, basically. We paved the whole road, paved it back, it stopped right in front of my house. So I'm used to it, and I don't complain about it. I've never complained about it. I called DPW once, and they refer me to National Grid. I never called DPW again. I don't like to do that.
I'm betting that the gas company's going to pay particular attention to your area.
I'm sure they are. They're gonna have the lights flashing right into my bedroom
and-
every night as hot as they can.
No, and we understand and appreciate the fact that you're not only coming here on behalf of your residents, but in a sincere effort that other residents don't have the similar experience.
And
And
they don't have the time to come to meetings. They don't have the time to
No, we
follow up. They just make
appreciate-
a phone call, as I did, and, Ms. Kelleher responded to me right away, but National Grid didn't. So that's my...
And, yeah, Dennis, I'm going to ask you to respond, and then I'm going to open it up. If anyone else has any questions or comments, could you please just come up to the microphone?
Mr. Dillon, it's good to meet you.
Give me a card. Give me a card.
So on February 15th, after speaking to Barbara and Rachel Kennedy, the supervisor that did the leak repair out there, and leak repairs are different than main replacement. You have to find out where the leak is, and I don't want to get into the specifics, but it can be quite time-consuming. So I went to your house on the 15th. I left you a message on your phone. I actually took a few pictures, had a follow-up meeting with our construction supervisor to address this issue. I saw where they cut the street. There's a sidewalk, and then there's an apron. That's where they did the repair. I took pictures of your driveway, and we will address it. I just want to clarify that I did call you, left you a lengthy message. I was in front of your home, and that was on February 15th, approximately around.
What number did you call? Because I didn't get the message.
Well, we can check
I'm
that. The
gonna-
bottom line is, I
I'm
just
gonna-
want to try to
yep,
resolve this.
Thank you, and
Yep.
I'm gonna suggest maybe you two want to
Absolutely.
continue the conversation after
Yeah,
we
we'll take it
conclude this
offline.
matter on the, I just want to make sure if there are any other
Yep.
people who came to this meeting who have a question or a comment that we could try to address it. Yes, ma'am, could you come up?
I get it. It wasn't about my particular situation.
I understand.
I want to know that the town's going to be able to be responsive to me and to the other residents and assure that they do what they say they're going to do.
No, we understand
I
that.
don't want to be put in a position where
We got our best
We
people on
understand.
it.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Kirk. I live at 361 Main Street. And my question, and I appreciate that this work is going to be done, my question is kind of related to your question about whether the water mains are going to be replaced. Kind of for the DPW, has there been any discussion about some of the drainage issues being resolved at the same time while the road is open? I'm thinking of a couple places in particular. One is right around where the work is starting. I think it's right around Playground Road where there's one storm drain and it's not enough to handle the water. And another one I can speak very well to is right in front of my house. I'm directly across from Grand Army Memorial Hall.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been an issue that I've raised with the DPW several times, and there was a temporary fix put that only lasted for a couple months until the plows came and got rid of it. But I think I've lived in Hingham for quite a while. I think when the road was redone a few years ago, the drainage that was put in was not proper for the flow. The way the road is graded, the other side, there's like a big, dip down, and they've got 3 or 4 storm drains on that side. But the road is tipped towards my house, and there's only one storm drain for a very long time. The water gets backed up, and it actually becomes dangerous. I have a lot of pictures that we've taken over time, and it just would be helpful if while the roads are open and before there's another moratorium. Now, we've been very patient as homeowners.
Thank you.
And I've got 5 children that are going to be affected by this road work. So I'm happy to be patient, but I've also been patient with the DPW, and it would just be nice to know that there is a plan in place to address some of that drainage.
And I think I'm going to ask Roger and Tom if you can follow up on this particular question after this meeting.
Yeah, and I guess, I think it's a great question.
361.
Sort of drainage,
Across from GAR.
drainage generally along this work site, because it may not be the only place that we've got drainage issues, but
Right.
I in particular would like you to follow back up to make sure that this particular drainage question, because we all drive that roadway,
It's
we all know
dangerous.
it.
Yeah, people end up going onto the other lane,
Yeah.
or they, create such a huge splash that the people on the other side get completely
Yep.
sloshed. Our property, our own property gets sloshed. So, and actually the sidewalk it's about a foot away from the sidewalk starting to recede,
You in the
So-
old Driscoll house?
Yeah,
Okay,
That's-
yeah. It's
yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, a question or yes, sir?
Evening. Michael DeFabio, 434 Main Street.
Welcome.
Thank you, Selectmen and Selectwomen, for the work you're doing. I have no questions about the project because, and the timing, because it just, there's no other way to do it. So just a couple of quick questions. Will, at any time, our gas service, will it be continuous, or will it be turned off at various times?
There'll be a short interruption when they feed the new service, and a lot of the addresses, they'll be feeding the new service through the existing line that you have there, so they'll feed that through, but there'll be some point that they have to connect that to your boiler or your heater, so there will be an interruption, but that's could be just a couple hours, make that
Okay.
connection.
And you mentioned before the cut is 3.5 feet approximately. Now, is that where the pipe
Rough
lies?
depth.
Is that about how deep it is?
It's the
So,
depth,
The
sir. It's the depth.
depth, yes.
Yeah.
So, so we have a sidewalk, we have a little berm, and then we have the street. So the cut will be in the street, generally?
So what we're going to do as part of this, is because the existing gas main meanders, we're going to try to, National Grid, working through our office, we're going to locate the gas main hopefully in a more consistent manner, but it'll be in the street. It's a question of, is it going to be in the middle third, more towards the middle of the road? So we're going to look at that as we begin to move forward on the
So it's
project.
unlikely to invade the sidewalk?
Correct. Yeah.
Is that, yeah, that's fine. And I guess that's all I had, really. I just wanted to make sure, there's no other devices or terminals that are being installed that would be visible anywhere. Everything is below ground.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, that's
Thank you.
pretty much it. Thanks.
Anyone
Thank
else?
you. You want me to read the motion off?
So, one other thing, Roger, I guess, is just the drainage brings up the issue, is there anybody else in town, any other town departments that should be notified of the street opening? Like, I know you and I talked about the water company, Mary raised the issue about the water company. I think the drainage is a great question, but is there, while those roads are open, does anybody else need to know it to make any sort of plan before it gets paved that we can think of?
Not, other than the water company, not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
So, and bear in mind that and I was on that project, but when 228, that section of Main Street was constructed as part of that project, there were drainage upgrades. So whatever the issue is at 361, we have to look at that. But giving you a sense of what was done, there were drainage upgrades on that project that went along with it.
Okay,
But other than water company, we're not aware of any other issues.
okay.
Although in fairness, Roger, I've noticed the puddle too.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna look at it, yeah.
Good.
We will not
I
forget.
think what you're kind of hearing from this board is like, if it's
Fix it while you're there.
get it all
Well,
kind
look, I'm
of,
gonna brag a little bit. You guys have seen a lot of the work that we've done. We've paved well over half of the roads. And I would ask you, how many of those have you seen cut in the last decade? Very few.
Yeah.
We take a very hard line, and I think National Grid knows better than anybody that we don't like to go back and recut our roads. And I can only offer 10 years of proof to sort of indicate that.
Yep.
So we want to continue that.
Yep.
It's worked well.
I'm with you.
so we have, there are actually 5 different votes that, this is a very long motion that has to be read. Tom, do we have to read this entire motion, or can we,
No, you can vote it as
A grant of location as presented.
okay. Karen, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we authorize a grant of location in National Grid as presented in the attached motion and subject to the conditions outlined in the letter of February 5, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Just before we
Did I not
leave,
do it?
I want to thank everybody from National Grid who's here. I think it's great that all 3 of you came. I think you're hearing that people are understanding that this is important work to be done, but also asking National Grid to be responsive and responsible as the work is completed. Roger's going to be on it. This board's going to be on it. What happens this summer is going to make coming back for Phase 2 and Phase 3 either a heck of a lot easier or a heck of a lot more difficult. So, let's all work together on that. I think some of the sentiments and concerns that we heard this evening, we really want to be responsive to people. And, if, I think when people have questions or concerns, we got to work together and be as responsive as we can. So, Roger, I might also suggest that maybe a month into the work, we have you just come back to say, hey, we thought we were getting 150 feet a night, this is what we're getting, this is the crew we have, this is how it's going, because I'd like kind of in this forum to have an opportunity to just, see how things are going, so that if any adjustments have to be made, we can make them sooner than later.
It's
Yeah.
not gonna be a problem, sure.
Okay, great.
Mayor, I just want to remind the public about our public information meeting on this topic on February 28th, up here on the 3rd floor at Town Hall, down the end of the hall in the East Hearing Room.
Did we actually do the road?
Great. Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody, for that.
Thanks for being here.
Could our colleagues from National Grid, if we wouldn't mind, because there are some residents, some of them have questions, some others are here, if you wouldn't mind just hanging out in the hallway for a few minutes, if there are any additional questions or comments. We've got a few more items before we adjourn into an executive session. Our next item of business is Article V. And as we heard Article V last week, this is the continuation of the Town Wharf project and harbor improvements. I think last week we had a hearing to just sort of talk about the merits of the project. had an outstanding kind of question about sources of funds. Tom, do you want to?
Sure, so if we're going to just try to understand where this can be paid from, there's a few different options. I think the one that we were leaning towards the most, so the options, I guess, were being harbor-related funds versus general fund dollars, and then if general fund dollars, how? Whether it be a full appropriation in 1 year or via a component to a larger borrowing. I think I would recommend that we do this as part of a ban. We have about $11 million out in ban right now, in bans that we would be renewing over the course of any time here in the next couple of years. And when we do, or when we have a need to access this money, whether it was for a fire truck, for instance, the balance of the fire truck dollars, or this project, we could open or renew a ban and then add this debt to it.
And so a ban is essentially a short-term.
Sorry,
a
bond
short-term
anticipation
borrowing.
note,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
I'm actually familiar with the term.
Okay. Any questions from either of you, or?
No, I get, look, I guess we got to find the money someplace, and I think the logical place to look were the mooring permits and waterway fund. But as you pointed out tonight, I think there are a lot of hands going into that pocket, and we've got to look.
So much in the till.
Right? Yeah. I just, I don't know. We've got a lot of stuff on the table right now. A lot of capital needs, this included, certainly a priority for the town. It's just difficult to, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's difficult for me to get my arms around the totality of potential borrowing. And this is another incremental piece of that. And you're better at that than I am, but that's my frustration.
Bill, something to add?
Can I just, well, Bill is coming up, I can just point out.
What'd you say? Yeah, right.
Karen, Tom has gotten some information.
I just wanted to point out that.
Gonna break out that picture, Bill?
Preparing to come up as part of that $11 million in current bans, we would be paying down borrowing for the LSA, the Lincoln School Apartments, the Rec Park Drive property, and the Heritage Museum.
Okay.
In part, anyway, over the next year or so. That's not to eliminate those out of the bans, but it will certainly be paying down the principal, which will lower the debt service on those. So,
Okay. Makes me feel a little better.
a little bit, I'm just trying to help.
You're trying to help, I get
Bill,
it.
thank you for coming back.
Mary, and other members of the Selectmen, I just wanted to speak back to two questions that you raised last week as you come to your vote this evening. And we've had, as you know, we met the advisory committee last Thursday, had a fairly lengthy conversation over lots of this. But two of the items that came up were, one with the article as I had crafted it originally spoke to just will the town, and presumably the town would then be the vehicle for completing whatever work. You'd asked the question, we had inserted, Lucy Hancock and I had inserted as I drafted it, at the direction of the Harbor Development Committee, and you'd asked the question, well, shouldn't the Selectmen be included as well? I looked back at the two prior articles as it related to this work, and there was sort of no reference to, well, who was going to, because logically speaking, it is the Selectmen, because you sign any construction contracts. But given that the article was written the way it was written, the intent, at least currently, as I am working with the advisory committee, is to have the recommendation be clear, to be expended under the direction of the Harbor Development Committee and the Board of Selectmen. I hope that would be responsive to the question that you raised. The other one, did you have a chance to speak to Coughlin?
No, I did not.
Okay. The other one, which we will address, is you'd asked the question, let's make sure that the language in the article request was sufficient to clearly include resiliency, which is the increase of the height of the wharves. I had used the phrase initial repair and reconstruction, thinking that that was inclusive enough. We will be certain with Council Coughlin that we're covered on that front.
And
Clearly in the recommendation,
Yep.
we will spell that out.
And, it's funny, Bill, but after that meeting, I remember 3 years ago when I was chair of advisory, I think we had a similar conversation about the semantics, and we might even want to just look back on the language from 2015, because I remember there was repair. We had a similar discussion about semantics, so it might be that the language from 2015, which was vetted by council, might be satisfactory.
Though I'll remind you, the facts were a little different. The question there was, we were asking for money for analysis and preparation of plans.
Right.
And we wanted to allow ourselves
Right.
the ability to actually do some construction if we
Along the
had
way.
money left.
Yes.
Here,
Okay,
that is,
yeah.
but I hear
might
you.
not-
We'll certainly look to all of the precedents.
Well, and council was helpful then, so on this matter, they can be as well. I would also, Bill, you mentioned something last week, which is that, there was the potential that perhaps the comment wanted to reflect that usage of this funds might be contingent on receiving the grant. I don't know where you and advisory are coming out on that. You guys advisory owns the comment, so,
The intent is to address that. It was a very thoughtful conversation with advisory, good questions asked. One of those was, well, look, if we didn't get the full amount of the grant, we would only want to commit 20% of the amount of the grant, so we will craft it that way. I think all responsive to these very, very legitimate questions.
and I think what we'll do, and, to Karen's point, we want to understand, we want to have a point of view on the source of funding. And, like you, we're, kind of aware of all the different borrowing and where things are coming from. And, while we'll certainly make that recommendation, we'll also defer to our colleagues on the advisory committee who will, in the recommended motion, determine the source of funding as they do for all of the other spending money articles. Any other questions or comments on Article V before we,
No.
okay, would you like to make a motion?
Recommend favorable action on Article V.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
I don't believe we have any appointments tonight. We have, I think, one or two other votes. No,
Nope, we just had one really long.
okay. I usually miss them. Town administrator report, Tom, anything? Okay. Paul, anything?
Yeah. The board collectively has been receiving communications from residents in town expressing their concern over the proposed 40B project known as Riverstone. Some of you may have noticed signs up and around town, and quite frankly, I find that to be uplifting, that those that don't live in the affected area are nonetheless in support of their neighbors who feel under siege by what's being proposed in their neighborhood. I think for purposes of clarity, it's got to be appreciated and understood that the Zoning Board of Appeals is that board that's statutorily charged with making the decision with respect to the comprehensive permit that's been filed at the former Viking Lane neighborhood off of War Street. I can say from personal knowledge, having worked with the ZBA, as it's comprised presently, the town is in excellent hands. They apply the law appropriately and very carefully. So I'd ask that those that communicate to us understand that, our heads aren't, stuck in a hole somewhere. I'm sure each in our own way pays close attention. I watch the meetings. I'm trying to respond to the messages that are being sent to me, or us, but I apply individually. So, we've devoted significant resources to this. These kind of submissions are very, very difficult, and they continue to be so, you know, whether on the planning board or on the selectmen. You know, I've never really particularly enjoyed this type of development proposal. But I just ask that you, who are deeply concerned, know that you're not alone on this. You know, that we, the selectmen, are paying close attention. And as I said, it's gratifying to see, you know, people that live nowhere near there with signs supporting the message that you're bringing forward. So I just want you to know that.
Thank you. Karen, anything to report?
Yeah, and I guess I'd add that the other emails that we've been receiving these last couple of weeks are folks that are commenting on the budget deliberations. And, you know, I think we all find it heartening that you're paying attention. You know, these are really important decisions that we'll be making recommendations on, and eventually we'll be asking you to vote on at town meeting. And, you know, the fact that you're paying attention and you have a viewpoint and you're sharing that with us, again, doesn't go unnoticed and does become part of the deliberative process for all of us. So I appreciate your time and energy in trying to understand the budget priorities and for giving us your viewpoint on those.
And I will close with some good news that actually Senator O'Connor's office has been sort of announcing a little bit, and Tom, you may need to kind of help me a little bit, but a few weeks ago, our office was contacted by our state senator, Patrick O'Connor. As the budget is being put together, there is a statewide capital infrastructure program, and Senator O'Connor called to ask the town and ask the board and the interim town administrator for some input as to a potential project for Hingham to submit for possible consideration. And Senator O'Connor laid out the criteria for submissions. So it had to be a project that would be, you know, ready to go in the next couple of years. It could not be related to things like roads, affordable housing,
Unfortunately,
seawalls, because those are being covered elsewhere. And in follow-up conversations we had with Senator O'Connor, we talked to him about all of our different capital needs and wanted to make sure as well that if we submitted a project for consideration, it wasn't precluded from getting state funding somewhere else. So obviously Foster School came to mind as well. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting as many of our state tax dollars back in Hingham as possible. And so anyway, the bill has been, the appropriation has been made. I hope I'm using the words right.
Municipal bond bill, but yep.
Right, and so now it has to go through a very lengthy hearing process. I think there are 70-plus communities who have, you know, money in there. We've asked for $2 million for our town hall project. This is a project to look at this facility and look at all the important activity that goes on here, which includes the senior center. It includes, you know, many other offices. So we've had a town hall study committee that's been doing work. And again, this is an opportunity to potentially bring some of our state tax dollars back into Hingham. Senator O'Connor has committed his support to working with us to try to build the best and strongest business case for why Hingham should receive this money. The fact that we're in the bill is a good thing, but it has a long way to go. And as we're looking at all of the many priorities that are so important in this town, making sure that we devote the necessary resources to this particular effort is one more of those. So we appreciate Senator O'Connor's work on it, and we will do our very best to position Hingham very well to receive this money. So with that, we will be entering into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to a personnel issue, because discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town. The board will not resume an open session. And roll call vote, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.